Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome once again to another Monday night version of We the People. Uh, as in keeping with our normal stuff here, we will, if you look down on the bottom, you can see where you can subscribe and donate on our YouTube channel. We are also on LinkedIn and Facebook. So you can check us out on any of those social media platforms. Our guest tonight is Mr. Erik Fleming. Mr. Fleming has a very, very extensive background in the Democratic Party as well as a number of other fields. So let's get right to our interview here and bring on our guest. Good evening, Mr. Fleming. How are you?
I'm fine, Brother King. How you doing?
Hey, every day above ground is a good day, my friend.
Yes, sir.
you
Yes,
know.
sir.
So how are things down your way?
Well, things in Georgia are, it's being Georgia at this particular point. The legislature's in session, and they have a Republican majority here, so they're pushing through their agenda what they want to do. Nothing, not anything different than what's going on at the national level.
Well, let's get a little bit into your background and tell us a little bit about yourself. Let's start with your background. Growing up in Chicago, what were some of the experiences that shaped your views on public service?
Well, I'm a little biased because I feel that the time I grew up in Chicago was very empowering for young black men. Um, the very first person I got to vote for was Harold Washington, who was the first black mayor of the city. And I had a great aunt who would babysit me. And part of the babysitting was whenever she went to go vote, she took me with her. So I've been exposed really ever since I guess 3 years old as far as politics. I joke with my friends that my little league coach was my precinct captain growing up. Chicago's a very political town, heavily Democratic town. So I think that really kind of laid my foundation.
Yeah, I definitely know what you mean. My late aunt was our precinct committee woman, so yes, we all went through, the voting. Make sure you get out to vote, and then when you get to church, the church, make sure you get out to vote. It was something that was instilled in us as young men and women, especially. Um, I'm a little older than you. We do share somewhat of a birthday. My birthday is February 4th.
Okay.
But I'm a little older, 47. But anyway, in our day and age, that was something that was very important, especially when you look back upon Martin Luther King and the different core, the different civil rights organizations that we had growing up as young men. Uh, But what motivated you to run for the office in Mississippi in the late 90s?
So, like I said, I grew up in Chicago, and once I graduated high school, I went to Jackson State University. And I thought that was kind of ironic considering one of my favorite players was Walter Payton, and that's where he went to school.
Okay.
And so,
Sticking with them Chicago roots.
Yeah. And so when I got down there, as a student leader and all that, I got involved in the politics there in Mississippi, and I just got real involved, just dove right in. It was like right after I graduated, I worked for the guy who eventually won for governor that year. That was Ray Mabus. And then and Mike Moore did some volunteer with him, his attorney general race. They both got elected in 87. And just really started working my way up the process that way. I got elected to president of the Young Democrats. I got elected national committee man to Young Democrats of America, so I got to sit 2 years on the DNC. Uh, let's see, I was on the state executive committee. I was chair of the county committee, and while I was chair of the county committee, a couple of the more influential black businessmen came to me and said, "Erik, we think you ought to be our next state representative." And I said, okay, because I had run for office, I think 3 times prior to that and had lost. I had been the Democratic nominee for tax collector and ran twice for the city council. Didn't win those, but uh, our state representative got elected judge. And so there was a special election. So I ran to finish her term. And then later that year, I got elected for a full 4-year term.
Can you tell us a little bit about the political climate in Mississippi in the 90s? I know a lot of us might have some misconceptions because of, the poverty level of Mississippi, with the education that we kind of look down upon Mississippi as being not only one of the poorest states in the union, but also one of the most least educated. What was the political climate in the 90s running as a black man?
So you kind of laid the foundation of what was the challenge. I have the distinction of being the 50th black person to be elected to the Mississippi legislature since 1967, and those 9 years that I got to serve, those were really like the last 9 years that Democrats had any real political power in the state. Um, we controlled the House of Representatives all 9 years I was there. So we were able to get some things through, but you could see it coming, right? You could see, one of the big fights we had was like voter ID and just trying to deal with a lot of the socioeconomic stuff. Uh, and so what I tell people that, it's not just in Mississippi, but every black caucus in the United States, our major victories are what we can stop as opposed to what we can get past, right? And so we had the second largest. Well, when I got there, we were the largest, and then Georgia did their redistricting, and so they ended up being the largest black caucus in the nation. So we were the second largest. So we had some historical clout, and we had a good mix of people that were young like me at the time, and then some folks that were there for a long time, including who we called the dean, Robert Clark. He was the first black to get reelected during Reconstruction, and I had the privilege of serving with him and then his son in the state legislature. And so we had a really good mix. And so even though, and the politics was different, Brother King, like, it was like we still could, meet in the back room and have a conversation. We could have committee meetings in the elevator and work some bills out. It's like now, uh, it's like the Republicans go to their side, the Democrats go to their side, and uh, it's just it's hard to work out compromise now. But back then, you still could pull a few votes, um, where you needed to be, and every now and then the Black Caucus would side the Republicans on a couple of issues. It just all depended on what was before us.
Okay, all right. Now, you do have a law enforcement background. As a former deputy sheriff with the Fulton County Sheriff's Office, how did your time in law enforcement influence your approach to politics and policy?
Well, it made me better informed about how to do policing right, um, and in the correction system more particularly. I think one of our biggest challenges in the United States is discerning criminal behavior from mental health. Um, the way that, coming from a legislative perspective and knowing where the dollars were coming from and how they were spent, and then actually being in law enforcement, being in corrections, you could see what the tail end of that was and how there was a disconnect between what is perceived in the Capitol and what you're actually dealing with on the ground. And it's very eye opening, to go through law enforcement training, and then you still see what happens with a Breonna Taylor or a George Floyd or uh, an Alton Sterling. I mean, the list can go on. Uh, it actually makes me madder than I was when I was, because I came from a law enforcement background when I got elected, and but it's like, as you go through more training and you deal with things, and you're like, so if they're teaching us how to do this, then why is that not being applied in the streets? Why is it not being applied in the communities that you're supposed to be serving and protecting? So if anything, my background fuels my activism even more, because I know what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do, and it just seems like a lot of people try to take the easy way out and do the wrong thing instead of the right
Hmm. Okay. Did you ever experience in law enforcement a conflict with your work as a director of policy for the ACLU of Mississippi?
No, again, because it's 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 an advantage when you actually have a background in something, um, that you can apply to your activism, right? So I always, people tease me because, when I tell stories about different jobs that I've had, um, people are like, you've done a little bit of everything, haven't you? And I said, yeah, pretty much. But I felt that in my public service, because I've had such a diverse background in things, especially law enforcement, that makes me more effective in trying to get the right things done and speak on behalf of people that maybe don't have a voice on certain things, or definitely don't have a certain perspective on things. So, I always, anything that I do for the public, I look at my life experience as an advantage to do the right thing and do the work instead of, a conflict.
Well, how do you balance a law and order perspective with advocating a grassroots activism and criminal justice reform?
Again, it's like when you see, when I was in the legislature, I introduced a bill every year to deal with uh, criminal justice reform. I served on the juvenile justice committee, uh, and taking the things that I had learned and trying to apply it in a way where it would be beneficial to people instead of holding people back, right? Um, it's one thing to just understand that you have this incredible power as a law enforcement officer, to do things, including take a life. But I'm an old Marvel guy, Brother King, and one of my favorite characters is Spider-Man, and he says, "With great power comes great responsibility." And so, in order to uh, utilize the tools that I had learned, you understand that you have a responsibility to do the right thing. So I never really felt conflicted. Again, like I said, I always used my expertise to try to help people in the streets understand a perspective. And I was always trained in my political science training at Jackson State and all that, is that if you understand both sides, then what your position is becomes stronger, because you not only know your argument well, but you know the counter argument and you know how to go after it.
Were there any pivotal moments during your career that shifted your stance on these issues?
I don't really think there was like pivotal things. I think it's just been, living life and doing everyday things and being, engaged in the world that you live in, right? Because some people, even in politics, they silo themselves and they say, oh, well, I got to do everything right politically. I got to know the right people. I got to do this and do that. One of the things I was known for when I was in the legislature was I would introduce like 150 bills a year. And some people would criticize me about that. But, for somebody that wasn't a chair of a committee during that time that I served, I was able to get like 20 pieces of legislation passed. And and even if I didn't get it passed, I could get a lot of stuff voted on one way or the other, right? And so one of the things, since you wanted me to cite an example, I think it was my first year in the legislature, and they wanted to take away a tax bracket from the Mississippi uh, individual income tax. So it's like if you make a certain amount of money, you pay 3%. You get to another bracket, you pay 4. Another bracket, you pay 5. Another bracket, you pay 6. Well, they wanted to take away the 6% bracket. So it was a real big debate, and I came in right as they were dealing with that. And I was standing in line to pay a bill. And there were some people in front of me. They did not know who I was. And they were just standing there talking. And one of the guys said, man, if these folks really want to give us a tax break, they need to stop taxing my overtime pay. And Brother King, it was just like that cartoon where you see the light bulb pop up over somebody's head. You know what I'm saying? When they get an idea, that's the way it kind of hit me. I was like, yeah, that actually makes sense. So next day, I went to the lawyers in the Capitol building and said, "Hey, is it possible for us to introduce a bill to take away the tax on overtime pay?" And he said, "Representative, you can come up with a bill for whatever you want. Our job is to write it." And so, we threw the concept out there. They pulled the codes and all that stuff. So I started introducing the bill. And I think it was my last year in the legislature, I actually got it to a point where you got to vote it up or down. It didn't pass, but at least Mississippi was one of the first states to actually vote on the issue one way or the other. So that's just kind of an example of how, just being me and living my life, I would just come up with ideas to try to help people.
I want to go off topic a little bit here because I want to talk about bridging the gap between law enforcement, the neighborhood. For instance, I'm thinking of the George Floyd incident right now, and I'm thinking of how that particular area is being contested by the so-called bad people with a bad reputation, or people that live, say, outside of the normal restraints of society versus the neighborhood. How do you get those two to the table and mediate without ostracizing one side or the other?
Well, I think that, when you say the bad people, I don't want to mix oil and water, right? I want to get good people that understand what law enforcement is really supposed to be about and get with the leaders of the community and how they can build a coalition to work together to make sure that policing is done right. It's not over policing. It's not under policing. It's just policing done right where the community has a say so, where people really feel protected and really feel that they have a right to the service that they pay for and deserve. And the folks that don't want to conform to that, we want to get them out of law enforcement, period. You can't really negotiate. The example I use, uh, you know, Satan thought he was in a negotiation with Jesus. Jesus thought he was being annoyed. You understand what I'm saying? So it was like, you don't really want the bad people in the room and try to compromise with them. You want to weed, separate the wheat from the chaff and get the good people in that understand, and separate them. And that's where the challenge is trying to get the members of law enforcement community to stop embracing the bad people just because they all wear a badge, right? That's the real challenge, to try to separate them, because once you get those bad seeds out, that bad element out, then you can really start a dialogue and deal with things. The biggest concern, though, that allows people to fall into that bracket is the race issue, right? Because people want to stay with their tribe, people want to stay with their community, and the reality about this nation as compared to any other nation is that it's been built by being diverse. So there's no way that we could have achieved what we wanted to achieve if we weren't able to pull some whites, pull some Jewish folks, pull some Latinos, pull some Asians, and build a coalition, right? Fred Hampton was killed, and he was pulling a coalition of poor white folks, Latinos, Asians, indigenous people, and the poor white people, they would consider them like the baby clan. But it's like, once Fred started talking to them about the economic injustice, they could relate to that because they were poor just like everybody else. So once you find a common ground, then you can start building a coalition. In law enforcement, the common ground is just making sure that people understand that the community that you work in, you may not necessarily live there, but you've got to interact with the people in the community in order to do your job effectively and for them to feel safe. There used to be a very simple thing when I was growing up, and I don't know if you experienced that in your schools, but we used to have this thing called officer friendly. This brother would come in with the badge. It didn't matter if it was a white officer or a black officer. It didn't matter what school they went to. But it was a group of police officers who went out to the schools and started explaining what police officers did. You had color books and all that stuff. Well, I had it a little different because my dad was a police officer for a minute. So I never really had a bad thing, but some of my friends, thought that was kind of cool, that this police officer would actually like interact with kids like that, right? And we used to have like the police athletic league, yes, and all those kind of things, where it's like, the officers were like our coaches, you know what I'm saying? So there was always that community buy-in. And, now it's gotten to the point where it's like, okay, once I clock out, I'm going to my crib, you know what I'm saying? And, I'll deal with them tomorrow, you know what I'm saying? And then they're working from 8-hour shifts to 12-hour shifts to 16-hour shifts. It all depends on what the manpower looks like. And that gets to be stressful. So that goes back to what I talk about mental health, right? Because if you start dealing with mental health in the United States and deal with it like we're all game. It's like, oh, we got to have a Peloton. Oh, we got to drink our AG1 or whatever. We're all down with our physical health, but we don't put that emphasis on our mental health. If we put the focus on mental health like we put on our physical health, that could alleviate a lot of these problems, because There's trauma that Black folks and Latino folks especially are dealing with, living in those kind of communities that they were historically boxed into. And then there's police officers who go through a training where it's like everybody's a target and you got to keep your head on a swivel, right? So at some point, you got to have a process where, as a human being, you got to deprogram from that trauma and from that paranoia. And if there's nothing to embrace that, if there's nothing to encourage that, then you're still going to have those dividing lines.
But we had an administration that decided that we did not need mental institutions, which is why we have a lot of these problems out on the street now. So I know, I mean, your police officer can't be a social worker, a diplomat, you know, a sheriff. I mean, how many different jobs can we throw, at police officers before we start using community relations to solve some of our immediate problems, such as homelessness, such as, like you said, mental health problems, uh, domestic problems. How do we take some of that stress off and put it back in the grassroots? I mean, we used to. I knew the beat officer in my neighborhood. We had the policemen, black policemen, that were a part of the fabric of the neighborhood. A lot of times now, policemen don't even live in the cities in which they're hired.
Yeah, that's a big thing here in Atlanta, Fulton County. Uh, I would dare to say half of the sheriff's office where I used to work, you know, didn't live in Fulton County. Now, you know, in this day and age of interstate highways and all that kind of stuff, it's not a bigger impact as it was when we were younger growing up, but it's still a detachment, right? It's like I get away from all this instead of having some buy-in. I had a cousin, and she wasn't in law enforcement, but she had a job in mass communication. She was a reporter. She grew up in Chicago, but she was working in Peoria. And so she would work her job in Peoria. And then as soon as she got off work that Friday, poof, she was in Chicago. And, you know, after about 3 months, the folks at the Peoria TV station told her, yeah, we're going to go in a different direction. And, she's like, well, I went to all these good schools in journalism and I interned at CNN. It's like, what? They said, you don't have any buy-in. It's like, we don't see you at any events in Peoria. Every chance you get, you on that road going back to Chicago. If you're going to be a good reporter in Peoria, you need to know what's going on in Peoria. It's like, we don't care about what's going on in Chicago, not unless it impacts us, right? And so she learned a lesson from that, and that's a lesson that you can apply really in everything that deals with people. The point that you were making about the community, the communities, if the community wants to deal with certain issues, they just need to organize and do it. You've got vehicles. It doesn't matter what your religion is. It doesn't matter what organizations you're involved with. There are vehicles in the Black community, especially, that if that's what they want to take ownership in, they can do that. They don't have to be experts. They just have to be committed in doing something in the community that they want to address, and they can get it. And where there's a will, there's a way. There will be resources there. Will you get billions of dollars for that? No, but you'll get enough that once you start making an impact, then everything that you need will start manifesting. Uh, One of the advantages I have a podcast, and I get to interview a lot of people, and one of the people I've befriended is a young man whose mom died in the Tops grocery shooting in Buffalo. And what he did was he decided one day that he grew up on the east side of Buffalo and all that. So he decided one day he was just going to give away some food, right? And so he started reaching out to folks and saying, including Tops, and say, hey, look, I want to do like some cooked meals for people, and then I want to give them like some groceries to take home after they eat. So he just went around and asked people to do this and all that. And so when he got through with that, somebody came to him afterwards and said, you started a nonprofit, right? And he was like, well, no, I just had an event. He said, no, that's exactly what nonprofits do. And so he took that action and made it a nonprofit called Agents for Advocacy in Buffalo. And now he's got like the Buffalo Sabres giving him money. He's got these business folks. He does, back to school stuff, with the supplies and all that. And he's really making an impact on the east side of Buffalo. But he turned a tragic situation into something positive. We innately, as Black people, we do that all the time. We've been doing it ever since our existence here. So there's no need for us to stop doing that. And there's no need for us to wait on somebody to give us the permission to do it. If we see a problem in the community, we have every right and we have the capability and the capacity to address it. So, I think the community organizations, in Chicago, I think about all these folks that are out here, even the folks that just pray every Friday to stop the violence in the city. They do that. The young people that shut down the chief of police's meeting in Chicago and basically got a district attorney elected because they just wanted the district attorney that was in there out. They didn't endorse the woman that won, but they definitely told everybody, don't vote for the one that's in there, right? So when the community decides that they want something done, they can get it done. It's just a matter of a commitment. And you're never going to have 100% buy-in, but, I'm just from the old school where it's like where two or three are gathered, stuff happens. And so as long as you have committed people dealing with a particular issue, you can address it, whether it's mental health, whether it's dealing with police relations, all that. The other thing I want to say is that you never want the police to lose that skill of diplomacy. Maybe they shouldn't be doing social work, but they definitely don't need to lose that diplomacy. Because one of the things they told us that the most important weapon that you have is your mouth and your brain. So if you come in with a bad attitude, they even get on you about how you stand when you talk to people, right? If you're standing there and you looking like you ain't got time to hear what they saying, or it look like you about to fight them, then people are going to respond to the body language that you're giving them. And they're not going to pay attention, even if you're saying the most peaceful things. If you're in the stance where it looks like, yeah, I'm about to take you out in about 5 seconds, they're going to be in combat mode the whole time. They're not going to be relaxed around you. So if you come at people in a professional, calm manner, they're going to come at you in kind. It's like I'll tell you this one story because I don't know how we're doing on time, but
don't worry, this is my show. We got plenty of time.
Okay. So there was this young man, and I was assigned to the jail, and we were trying to get him off of what they call boats, where he's laying on the floor basically in like a little plastic makeshift bed.
Yeah. Okay.
And was going to move him into a cell. And he was like, well, I don't want to go up in that cell, And I said, come on, man, I don't want you on the floor. You know what I'm saying? It's like we got a room for you. And I always used to tell the guys, I said, you understand, jail is temporary, prison is a commitment. So treat jail like you're just away from your home for a few days. You know what I'm saying? Don't act like that you're going to be in jail forever. Jail is different than prison. Prison means that you were convicted and you got to do your time. Jail means you ain't even been to trial yet. You might not even, the charges might even get dropped. More than likely, you're going to go home. So just don't, you know. But anyway, this brother, so finally he started.
Can I give you a perspective from the other side? Because I haven't been on your side, but I have been on that young man's side.
Okay.
And I remember, of course, this was back in the 60s, late 60s after I come home from Vietnam, knucklehead, the whole 9 yards. But when you talk about the difference between prison and jail, sometimes being in jail is much more dangerous than being in prison. When you're in prison, you adapt to a certain conformity, and you know exactly what you have to do. In jail, it's a very volatile situation. It changes at the drop of a hat. Sometimes there's mental people in with mental issues. Sometimes you have that guard that just wants to go home and doesn't really care about what's going on. And of course, you have those societies when you're in jail. Not saying that it doesn't carry on when you're in prison, but just that atmosphere of not knowing your fate sometimes lends to a great amount of desperation.
Yeah, I definitely understand that, and I respect you highlighting that because, but one of the things I used to try to get people to just, and that was just a different approach I had, right? Is that, I wanted people to stay as calm and not get caught up in all that stuff. And, I can't be a savior. I can't get everybody right. But, the people that I was responsible for that day, I wanted them to understand that you have somebody that's in your block that's not trying to treat you anything less than a human being, right?
True that.
So with this young man, he was coming up the stairs and then he peeked in and he said, "Nah, man, I ain't gonna go in." And he laid down flat on the floor, face first. And I'm just kind of looking at him, and he said, "I'm not going in. I'm not going in." So I kind of kneeled down and I whispered in his ear. I said, "Why are you trying to act like Rosa Parks right now?" Right? And he did exactly what you did. He started laughing. And he got up, he looked at me, he picked up his stuff, and he went on in the cell. You know what I'm saying? And I had no problem with that guy during the time that he was there because it was like, "Hey, Depp, what's going on?"
That was your rapport with him, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And see, that's what I'm talking about. It's like with, you deal with the people that, like you said, there's officers. It's like they think that just because you're in jail, you're not human anymore. That's insane, right? It's like they're just as human as you. And I used to tell the guys in the jail, I said, "Look, the only difference between me and you is the uniform we wear, right? Because somebody accused you of something, they ain't caught me yet." So it's like, that's why I get to wear this uniform. You see what I'm saying? It's like, if you understand that about people, then you don't get so uptight about things. But like you said, it's real about the anxiety. It's real about the dynamics. Because jail is a temporary thing, like you said, those dynamics change. And when I worked in the jail, most of the time I worked in classification. So there is definitely transition there because it's like, I came in during COVID here in Atlanta, so it was like I'm dealing with people for like 2 weeks. If it works the way it's supposed to, you're only supposed to deal with them 3 days, and then they get assigned to wherever they're going to be until they go to trial. But because of COVID, they had to stay 2 weeks, so you got to know them a little better and all that. But and like you said, those societies, as you put it, I like that. Might form a little easier if you're in the same spot for 2 weeks as opposed to just 3 days. But it was just a reminder, this is going to be a transition. It's like you're going to leave one way or the other. You're either going to go to a cell, a block where you're going to wait until you go to trial, or you're going to get bailed out. And so I just always used to try to convince people, but it's really a hard thing, man. And I don't discount the struggle, but I guess part of me always wants to keep people in their humanity. I used to, when I was working in the jail in Mississippi, I used to work on this place we called the county farm, where we used to take guys out and they would go work, like clean up streets, whatever, paint fire hydrants, whatever they want them to do, right? And, and bring them back. So in the morning, I would come in and, I used to tell them, now, I don't condone the gambling, but I know that some of y'all got some noodles writing on this. So here's the scores from the games, right? And, I would do that. And so one guy came up to me and he said, "Why do you do that every day?" I said, "Does it bother you?" He's like, I just don't understand why you do that. He said, "I'm a convict. Why would you care if I knew what the score was in a game?" And I said, "That's the problem. You have a title of a convict, just like I have a title of a deputy sheriff, And it's like at any point in time in our life, if we want to change that, we can change that. I don't have to work for the sheriff's office anymore. You don't have to be a convict anymore, right? And if you're here at the farm, that title of convict is about to be off of you because you're getting ready to get out." So I said, the most important title you need to understand is that you're a man, that you're a human being. And if you treat yourself that way, not only do you deal with the stressful stuff, but you can deal with the little stuff. You can deal with the light stuff. You can appreciate stuff. You can feel things, right? And a lot of times we get so caught up in our conflict and our job and our stress, we forget that we're human. And so we don't appreciate the things like a significant other or a kid, a child or a best friend. We just kind of push things aside. And that doesn't help our mental abilities at all. It just it strains our mental health, because the one thing that we have to have as human beings is connectivity. We have to be able to relate to each other. We ain't got to like each other, but we need to be able to interact and get along with each other, right? And be able to coexist. And so, I just have a different approach about things, and I try to take things in a way where if you can make it work, then make it work. If it can't work, then we figure out another way to get the same result, not doing the thing that failed, right? And to me, that's just politics is like that, law enforcement is like that, working just a regular everyday job is like that, living in a family is like that. You just have to go about trying to make sure that we focus in on what we can do, not get caught up in what we can't do, but just figure out another way to get around it. It's like you've got several options with a mountain. You can climb it, you can go around it, or you can go through it. Whichever way is the best way to get you to the other side of the mountain, do that.
Hey, well said. Well said. Let's talk a little bit about policy and national impact, especially starting with the Democratic Party in the South. From your perspective, what was the biggest challenge that Democrats faced in Mississippi and in the broader Deep South?
Um, the same thing that they're dealing with now at the national level is courage, right? Um, you know, when you see that people are doing wrong, if you want to stop them from doing wrong, then you've got to be the opposition to that. You can't just say, when it comes to legislation creating laws to be amenable to all of society, you compromise on things. You say, well, I bring this perspective, you bring this perspective. We sit down in a room, we hammer out and see if this can work for everybody, right? But when people are just blatantly being wrong, when they're blatantly being racist, when they're blatantly oppressing people, you can't say, well, I can see some validity in that. No, there's no validity in that. And so one of the biggest challenges I have as a Democrat is trying to get people to fight what they see as wrong. Take, for example, what just happened at the president's address to Congress, right? So, Al Green got up there and pointed at Kane and started talking about don't cut Medicaid, right? He knew he was breaking the rule by doing that. And he basically said, okay, you know, I'll accept whatever punishment you're going to give me, but I needed to have that moment, right? And then, and then the other Democrats were sitting there with the little, somebody called them auction paddles or whatever, like with these little
Yeah.
signs. But my thing, what I said on my podcast was, uh, we didn't need to be in the room. We didn't even need to be there, right? Because we want to tell America this ain't normal. The best way to show that it's not normal is do something that is not normal. What is normal is to show up and give deference to the president, show it your respect, and sit in your seats and just listen to the speech. What shows that it's not normal is we don't even come to the building. We don't show up. You want to talk to your folks about your craziness, your weird ideas, then just talk to your folks. We're not going to participate in that, right? And we're gonna do what we need to do to stop you at every turn, right? Because the Republicans had no problem doing that when Obama was president or Joe Biden. I mean, you literally had Republican members of Congress saying, I want the president to fail, which to me is treasonous. But because if the president fails, we're all screwed, right? But he said, this guy, what's his name, Jim DeMint, he said, I want to see the president fail. I don't want to see him do anything right. Uh, you know, I said, so you had a guy say that when the president is trying to do the right thing for people, but we're not saying anything like that when it's obvious that the president is not trying to do anything good for anybody other than himself. So to me, like I said, the biggest problem is courage. We've got to get the political equivalent of street mentality. And when I say street mentality, I mean grassroots organizing. I mean uh, civil disobedience. I mean learning the rules enough where you can slow the process down so they can't get what they want, right? Uh, we got lucky when President Bush, uh, George W. Bush was in office because he wanted to implement a lot of the things that we're dealing with now, but God intervened on those. We had 9/11 and we had Katrina. So those two events pretty much dictated the 8 years that he was there. Uh, we ain't got nothing like that right now. And so this guy has got full reign to do what he wants to do. And I just really want, there, and then I think it's time for some people to take it to the house. I mean, God bless you, I love you, and all that stuff. I wanted Michael Jordan to play forever. I wanted Walter Payton to play forever. I wanted, you know what I'm saying? But at some point, they realized it's time to me to step aside and let somebody else come in. Can you imagine Michael Jordan trying to play till Kobe was in his 30s? Stop. You know what I'm saying? That's not how it works. So politics should be the same way. Yes, you want elders, right? You want elders to give advice and lead, but they don't necessarily have to be in the seat of power to do that, right? Samuel was older than Saul, but he wasn't the king. But he had the advice and ear of God, and he was trying to convey that to Saul. We've got people that have been in politics and elected officials for a long time. Step aside and let somebody else younger come in, learn from the mistakes that you've made, listen to the counsel that you give them so they can be better leaders for their communities, right? But if you got people, we literally have 40 people that's over 80 that's still in office, right?
Yeah. Anyone older than me should not be in office. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think
I'm 78. I mean, like you said, the experience is one thing, but I think that we should not have anybody in office over the age of 56.
Yeah, I mean, well, I wouldn't say that low, right? Because the way that politics works, some people are really hitting their stride at about 56, right? If you get a president like an Obama, if Kamala had gotten in, somebody in there like 55, 60,
Term
but then
limit.
the president is the top position. So, after you serve that term or 2 terms, if you're given the opportunity, then you take it to the House, right? And
Precisely.
and you become like Bill Clinton, the sage old man that's telling folks, Bill Clinton's like, oh, Trump's older than me, and I've been president already. You know what I'm saying? I mean, why are y'all voting for this guy? You know what I'm saying? And and an alternative would have been Joe Biden, who was older than Trump. And so I don't want to do like a science fiction kind of thing and say, well, you just you can't, but it would seem to me that you would have to get to a point where I don't want to be doing that at that age. If I was 78 years old and I was sitting in the halls of Congress, I'm like going, will somebody please run? and take this joke off of me, please. Somebody. I'd have a whole cadre of folks. You want to run? You want to run? Let's have a primary. Y'all go for it, and whoever wins, come get this place because I'm going to the House. I'm done. Right? I mean, and so that's part of the problem. See, change should be evolutionary, but because people get caught up in power, then change becomes revolutionary, right? It's like people don't want to give it up, so you got to get them out instead of them doing, the George Washington thing and just say, look, George Washington could have just said, you know what, I got this position now, I'll be the king. He said after 8 years of that, he said, you know what, I'm going to take it to the House. I'm going to go to my farm and retire. And that's the reason why we have this concept about 2 terms for the president, because he set that example. So I just think that, we've got to get out of an old mindset to deal with the challenges that we face, right? If the enemy is getting younger and if the enemy is getting more sophisticated, then we've got to do the same thing. If we're still saying, well, we got our tried, true, proven leaders, they've won 20 elections, they've done this and done that, you're going to see what happened in 2024. Those young, energetic folks came in and they took them out. They took them out of power. And it's like there's nothing worse than somebody that's well, the best analogy to not be offensive is to say it's nothing worse to see a lion without an old lion without fangs, an old lion without a roar. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like you got to keep that fight. The civil rights movement was won by young people. Every movement that has happened in the United States was won by young people. You may have had a leader to kind of guide them and shape them, but Martin Luther King died before he was 40. He wasn't an old man. He was young himself. So if you're going to change the world, it's going to be the young people, the young adults to come in. People ask me all the time, Erik, why don't you get back in politics and all that? And I said, I did my time. I said, when I lost in 2008, when I ran for the U.S. Senate, that's like what? That's almost 20 years ago? And now you want me to dust myself out and come back out there? No, that's not how that works. It's like I had my moment. You see what I'm saying? So now I'm in a position where I can use my podcast, I can write a blog, I can speak to people, I can do this and do that, and give advice to people who are young, who are fresh in the mind, who don't have the same limitations or boundaries that I had, and get out here and make the changes that need to be made. I don't have a problem with that. There's a lot of people, man, but when they get a hold of something, we had one guy, man, he would they would call him and say, hey, we need to get a black guy on this board. He said, I'll do it. No, we didn't call you to be on the board. We wanted you to suggest somebody. He said, yeah, I'm suggesting me. I'll do it. And he ended up being on like 20 national boards and stuff. It's like, bruh, that's not how that works. They were calling you to spread the wealth, to build an army of people, not for you to get all the power. So, yeah, I mean, that's the challenge that Democrats in the South, Democrats in the North, Democrats in the East, Democrats in the West, they've got to get rid of the old lions and let the new lions do what they need to do.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like I said, I just think that we need term limits as well as age limits. I'm out here in California, Dianne Feinstein. I mean, they had to wake her up. I mean, come on, Nancy Pelosi. I'm not saying that these are bad leaders, but I do think that 80 or 90 is a little too long to be in office. At least that's from my perspective.
Yeah, I want to be, whatever time I have left on this earth, I want to have some fun. Ain't no fun going up to Washington, flying from San Francisco to Washington, D.C. every week. Come on, man. Come on. It's like at some point you got to let that go. It got to the point where these crazy folks coming in our house and beating up a husband, and they in their 80s. Come on, man. It's not. No, I would have shut it down then. It's not worth all that. I said I fought the good fight. I've done what I need to do. If you need me, call me. But I'm out. I'm gone.
With the ongoing battles over voting rights, where do you think we stand today in terms of combating voter suppression?
Well, we've taken some steps back. When you look at Citizens United, that opened up the door for money to come in. The stripping of the pre-clearance from the Voting Rights Act opened the door for them to create all these laws and not have to have somebody look at them and say, guys, no, you can't do that, right? I think we're not totally back to the days where people had to guess how many bubbles was in a bar of soap or pay a poll tax. But at the same time, it's not the same as it was 60 years ago when the legislation was new and being impacted and started making a difference and really made an America a democracy either. So, I just think that uh, we have to be vigilant on all fronts. We have to have lawyers to go into the court system and challenge every system, every change that's out there, right? You got to have people out in the street to gather the masses and to get people informed and to keep people engaged and march and protest and whatever. And then you got to have elected leaders who stand up and say this is wrong and do everything within the confines of that Capitol building or the city hall or whatever, and use every tool that they have to shut bad stuff down. I think if you have that combination, which is what the civil rights movement basically was, right? And and not get caught up on who's going to be the leader, but it's like, what can you do to help, right? Once you get that mindset into place and get that symphony going, you know, then you're gonna stop a lot of this stuff. And it's like now with this whole dynamic with social media, right? You have a podcast, I have a podcast, we got all those tools, right? You've got the influencers on social media. When you start taking all of the tools and start using the tools to combat what's out there, you're gonna win. Right is always gonna beat wrong, right? Light is always gonna conquer darkness. It might not be overnight, but it's gonna happen because that's the way the order of the universe is. So even though you might enjoy some success being on the dark side, you know, it's like it's gonna be fleeting. So you know, what the children of the light have to be committed and be patient and be organized and just be willing to fight until that is dealt with. The only way you can fight voter suppression is to vote, is to just show up. Because it's like, okay, in Georgia, for example, they tried to shut down and say, okay, well, you can only have so many precincts and you can have so many ballot drop off boxes. Okay. So everybody, let's carpool. Hey, what day are we going to the thing? All right. Yeah, you're gonna be in line, but you're gonna do it. And then, some of the folks were giving folks water and all that. And then the Georgia folks said, "Oh, you can't give them water. You can't give them sandwiches." Okay, so people brought their own. People packed their lunches to go vote. Right? It's like, well, who gave that to you? I did. From the job that I have, I bought these groceries. Since nobody can give it to me, I brought my own. And there's nothing you can do about that. Because if they try to tell people they can't bring their own food, it'll be anarchy in Georgia. So, it's like, I can bring my food to a Georgia football game, but I can't bring it to vote? Come on. So, you know, people are going to try to do what they want to do. And, a lot of people always want to bandwagon and say, well, they seem to be winning, so maybe they the right team. No, they're not the right team. They just have an advantage right now, but it's not going to last if you stay and fight. So there's no magic bullet for it. It's just when you see an injustice happening, you get together, you organize, you strategize, and you fight it. Period. Whether it's voter suppression or anything else.
I want to ask you a little bit about your podcast. You launched a moment with Erik Fleming, which gives a platform to discuss important issues affecting African Americans. What inspired you to start your podcast, and how do you use it as a shaping uh, uh, platform for political discourse?
So I give all credit to Donald Trump for starting my podcast. So when I first got here in Atlanta, I started Ubering, right? And uh, like a lot of people, I had the alerts. So whenever President Trump tweeted, right, you would get an alert. So I'm driving people around, and then my phone will start buzzing. They'll say, "Hey, what's going on with your phone?" I said, "That's just the president tweeting. Don't worry about it. I'll read it when I get you where you gotta go." And then I would read it, and I would be so angry and just so it's like, is he really? Does he really think like this? Is he really saying this? And it got to a point where I just said, I got to do something, and I ain't got time to sit down and write down what I got. So I just started recording it on my phone, like a little journal. And one of my college roommate, who actually was a mass communications major, I told him what I was doing. He said, you got to start a podcast. Just put it out there. You used to be an elected official. Somebody will listen to it. You know what I'm saying? I said, okay. And so I look at the podcast as therapy for me, to be able to get stuff off my chest and be critical about what I'm seeing happening, right? Or maybe even offer some positive suggestions, not just be mad all the time. So once I started doing that, then it just got to be a thing, and I saw how easy it was to kind of put it together. And, it just eventually grew, and, I started that in 2019. So it'll be 6 years in July that I've been doing the podcast. The big thing I want to do with the podcast, what I try to do, is that it doesn't matter what color the guest is. I want them to answer questions from somebody Black, to address some things, that Black people deal with. But one of the things that I've been really blessed to have is guests that get that. Because when I first started, people like saying, well, I don't know if I'm the right person. I said, aren't you the person that did such and such and so and so? Yeah. Do you know how many Black people were affected by what you did? I never really thought of it that way. You were thinking of a human thing, right? Well, Black folks are human, so they need to know who was the person who came up with this organization, who was the person that wrote this book, who was the person that has this podcast, right? And so, once I started building, like a little cadre or whatever, a guest catalog, then, people had no problem coming on. I've had people, they'll do my podcast and turn around, they'll be on CNN the next day. You know what I'm saying? So I've been real lucky that I've been able to get people, and maybe it's because they'll say, oh, well, he used to be an elected official. This ought to be good. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what it is, but I've been very fortunate to reach out to people and been able to get them to come on and and talk about things in a way where it's affecting Black people, but it's not patronizing, right? It's not like they trying to lay it on and show all their Black credentials. They're just being who they are. And I'm trying to expose my people to all these perspectives that they may not. And then I've had Black people on who are Republicans. I've had Black people on who've been libertarians. I have Black people on who think that we shouldn't even have a process. You know what I'm saying? Because my thing is, I want to highlight them so you understand that Black people are not monolithic in thought, right? And then I try to get people who are not necessarily elected officials, but people who are out in the community doing the work, right? People that are out organizing, people that are taking a stand on issues, whether it's gun violence, whether it's, raising money for Black nonprofits, DEI trainers, all that kind of stuff. because, you know, when you get on TV, you see the Al Sharpton and, you know, and all the Ben Crumps and all that stuff. And, you know, if I could get those people on the podcast, no problem. But there's thousands of people that are doing the work to help people in their communities. And so I tell them to use my podcast as a vehicle to get their message out. There's some people, I'm the first podcast they've ever been on, right? There's a sister, as a matter of fact, she just got fired. She's one of those federal employees just got fired. And she got interviewed on one of the networks. So I reached out to her. I sent her email, and she said, "Are you sure I'm the one that you want on it?" I said, "Are you this person that just got fired? Are you the person that said, you know, I may run for political office?" She said, "Yeah, that's me." I said, "Well, you're the one I want on the podcast, right?" And, you know, I've had people that have been doing grassroots work for years. They've never been on a podcast. There's this Native American gentleman. His name is John Echohawk. Never seen him on any national TV. Never seen him on any PBS documentary, none of that stuff. But all he's been doing is that, you know, everybody knows about the ACLU and all that stuff. He's been the lead attorney fighting for the rights of Native Americans for almost 50 years. When they want to appoint a Supreme Court justice, they call him, right? Because part of the job of the Supreme Court is that they have to be the final court for Native American disputes. So they've got to have at least one person on the court that understands Native American tribal affairs. And by the way, that judge is Neil Gorsuch, by the way. But I got to interview that guy and put him out there and just let people know there are people fighting for people's rights every day. And, you know, I just say I try to uplift people. And so that's what I use my podcast for. I use it as therapy for me, and I use it to uplift people that are doing the work that needs to be done in the community.
Interesting concept. I might have to try that. I actually started my podcast during the Donald's first term, and I probably made the mistake of doing too much arguing instead of talking, and eventually I learned, of course. But you know, having conservatives or someone, you know, of a different belief, I found myself having very little tolerance, and it would turn into a shouting match. So I had to kind of temper myself in order to make sure that, you know, regardless of how asinine I might think this particular person's idea is, he still has something to contribute, if it's nothing more than to give me the warning signs and the stop signs that I need. So, yes, having a podcast is definitely a learning experience. But from your experience, how can progressives effectively engage voters in rural and more moderate areas without losing sight of core values?
Well, I just think it's the same as being Black. I think that people want authenticity, right? And, you know, if you are a Kwame Ture, then don't just be Kwame Ture, you know, on Auburn Avenue. Be Kwame Ture in Nebraska. Be Kwame Ture in Idaho. right? And if people follow you, you know, then great. If people don't agree with you, keep it moving, right? It's like people want to compartmentalize and just say, okay, well, we only want to speak and stay within our group. The only way you can evangelize is that you got to spread the gospel out to everybody, right? That, that's the mission. When as a Christian, we're taught that in Matthew 28, they talk about the Great Commission. That's when Jesus, for the last time, he said, I need y'all to go and spread the good news, right? And so that's really our job. Our job is to go out and spread the good news. Some people may not think I'm progressive, and that's fine. The labels shift. All I know is I think that people should be entitled to live the life they want to live, to make as much money as they want to make, but not be greedy, right? But make as much money as they want to make to live the life they want to live, and just let everybody do their thing. If you wanted your child to be homeschooled and I want my child to be in a public school, let's make that happen, right? But don't try to take away my public school money to fund your homeschool, because I'm not going to try to take away your accreditation of being a homeschool so my child can get in college and yours can't, right? It's like it's all about getting to a point of coexistence, not love, not everybody singing Kumbaya. It's just coexistence. It's like you're a Steelers fan, I'm a Bears fan, right? But we both love football. So it's like that's our coexistence. We love the game of football, so it doesn't matter what team gets us to that game, gets us to the game we love. We're there at that one nexus point, right? That's how we should be in a society. Now, there's different ideas. It's been different ideas even before this country was founded. When you look at Harvard, right? Harvard was a private liberal Christian school. There were some folks that graduated from Harvard felt that there should be a conservative Christian school, and so they created Yale, right? And basically the debate about American leadership has funneled from that separation between Harvard and Yale to the modern day. And it's expanded from theology to political leadership, right? And so, but Harvard and Yale coexist. Those two universities understand their history, so they're both part of the Ivy League, and they coexist, and both of their mission is to churn out leaders for America, right? So when Booker T. Washington decided, yeah, I'm going to do that with Tuskegee. I went to a black school. I want to create a black school that does that. That's what Howard University is, Jackson State, Hampton, all these schools, Fisk, all these black colleges throughout the nation. Booker T. Washington's thing was, you ain't got to like me. You ain't even got to be friendly with me. I just need you to let me coexist, right? I'll stay down here in Alabama and build a community where we're self-sufficient. We ain't going to be no threat to you as long as you let us do what we want to do. If we want to farm, let us farm. You know what I'm saying? If we want to teach people how to make cars, let us teach people how to make cars. Don't interfere with that, right? If you think that something I made is worth buying, buy it. Don't get hung up on the fact of what I look like or what neighborhood I come from. Buy it. Because black folks don't have that inhibition. We'll go to Walmart. we'll go to Costco. You know what I'm saying? But we also go to our neighborhood stores too, right? I mean, we'll go to our local barbecue joint or wherever, because we inherently, and this may sound Pan-Africanist or whatever, but we inherently understand coexisting. We come from a continent that's about coexisting. The words that we use for Africa, uh, you know, that's not an African word. That's Latin, right? If you actually do an anthropological study of the continent of Africa, you will find that there are over 800 different languages, and not one of those languages has a name for the continent, right? Now, there's some scholars that have been using the word, and I can't remember it right off now, but up until this point, my training is that there's been all these different languages, all these different nations, tribes, however you want to identify them, and there's no word for the continent, but there is word for community, right? In every one of those languages. And so the key is that we just want to coexist, man. We just leave us alone. Let us do our thing, and you can do yours. You know what I'm saying? You want to play hockey? Fine. I'm gonna play basketball. It's all good. You know what I'm saying? If we want to compete about how many people watch our games, that's friendly competition. But don't try to ban basketball because we black. No different than we try to ban hockey because it's white, right? It's like there's a place for all of it because there's some white folks that play basketball and there's some black folks that play hockey. So just the bottom line is we just got to get to a place where we understand that the ultimate goal is to get us to what America was designed to be, was a place where we coexist. We are the only nation where every nation in the world is represented in one place. There are literally cities in the United States that if you took that city and put it in the country, they would be either the largest, second largest, third, fourth, fifth largest city of that nationality in the world. Chicago, for example. If you took Chicago and put it in the country of Poland, it'd be the third largest city in Poland. If you took everybody out that wasn't Polish, it would still be the third largest city in Poland. Because the United States, whatever your belief system is, how it's worked out is that every nation in the United States, in the world, is represented in the population of the United States. Everyone. So that gives us a unique ability and a unique charge to show the world how you coexist. And we got some folks that think that because they don't have a certain amount of melanin in their skin and they have other recessive genes, that they should be at the top of the pyramid compared to everybody else. It's like, that's not how it was designed to be. There's a reason why people of faith say, God bless America. Because the whole saying is because America is a blessing to God. Right? And if we really started looking at it that way, then your politics, your communities, everything would fall in line with that whole thing. I mean, people, and I'm not getting into anything. If whatever your faith is and all that, but in my faith, I believe in divine intervention, and I look at the United States Constitution and the Declaration of Independence as documents that were divinely intervened. Because how could a slaveholder write that all men were created equal if it wasn't God intervening in that writing? Because his life experience as a learned man, he was literally sleeping with his slaves. He And there's a guy, he worked on Black News Channel. He's like the seventh, eighth descendant of Thomas Jefferson, a black guy. And it's like, you know, but that same slaveholder, that guy that was raping his black slaves, was the one who put down on paper that all men are created equal. That's divine. That has nothing to do with him. That was divine intervention. Those words needed to be said in a document to tell a king we don't want to be a part of his kingdom anymore. That's divine to me. That's divinely inspired. And so everything that we've done is like a people that was enslaved were able to walk into a court of law and say, you can't, if you can't segregate the schools anymore. If you are going to segregate the schools, then you're going to pay for it. If you want us to have a separate school system, then we need to have the same amount of money as the other school system, period. And that's really what they were fighting for. They weren't necessarily saying, well, we'll just integrate everybody. That was the cheap way out. The reality was, it's like, if Sally Mae's school is going to get $200,000, then Tyrone's school need to get $200,000. That was what the argument was. And inherently, they were saying that separate is not equal. So if you wanted to be separate, you're going to have to pay for it. So, but that's just me, brother. I'm just, I just believe that's where we need to be. That's the goal that we need to get to. Now, we can argue about, do we want to have electric cars or not? Right? We can argue about how much, how fast you want to go on the highway. That's what you debate about in legislatures and all that. But when it comes to people, how they want to live their life, what community they want to live in and all that stuff, we shouldn't be restricting that at all. But that's just me.
Well, I'm going to kind of wrap things up here a little bit. I kept you a little bit over than what I intended, but looking ahead, let's look forward to our upcoming elections. What kind of issues should voters prioritize, and what do you think is the future holds for a political advocacy here in America?
So I think people need to really vote what's in their best interest, right? Not based on, rhetoric, but, vote for what is important to you. And I really want Americans to shape the conversation more so than let a poll or a politician tell you what the issue is. As somebody that has been a politician, I can get up there and give you a speech and say, we need to build more daycare centers, right? And I keep hammering that point. I've done my research, and I know that 80% of the people in my district love daycare centers. So I just keep hammering that point, and they say, well, why did you vote for Erik Fleming? Because he wanted daycare centers, right? And then I get in there. I don't build not one new daycare center for everybody else. Well, you're supposed to vote me out. But then I turn around and find out, people like dog parks. So I said, if you reelect me, I'm going to put more dog parks in there. And I ain't done nothing about the daycare center. But if I tell them, I know that 90% of them want dog parks, and I start preaching to them about the dog parks, they're going to vote for me again because I said something about dog parks, right? So instead of us being dictated to as to what our issues are, we need to tell the elected officials, this is what we need right now. And if the citizens dictate what the issues are, then the politicians that are for real are going to be the ones that get voted for. The ones that really tune into that and have a sincere plan of how to get to that goal that the people want, they'll get voted in. The folks that you know that they lying, you can tell that they BSing through that. Folks gonna run them out of there, right? So I mean, that's just how that goes, you know. So um, I think that's how we the people have to be more in charge of the process. I think it's time out for uh, top down as far as politics goes. It's got to definitely come from the community, right? The more the community stands up and says, this is what we want, right? Then, you know, and it's going to vary from city to city, it's going to vary from state to state. But it's like what's going to happen is you're going to have elected leaders at your local and state levels that are more in tune with what their community wants. And then those people who come from those states to go to a national body like the Senate or the House of Representatives, they bring that to the conversation. And you start having a dialogue about, well, what's going on in Montana that can help Mississippi, and what's going on in Georgia that can help Vermont, right? Um, that to me is the ideal situation. Um, Strategically, I just think, you know, the if you want Donald Trump out of office, act like it. Do what you gotta do. Register people to vote. Make sure that they show up to vote on election day. Make sure that whatever obstacles they try to put in there, you figure out a way to get past them. And the only way that, again, like I said, the only way you can stop voter suppression is to vote. Force them, put um, pressure bust pipes. So if they want to put us in a pipe, then give enough pressure to bust it open. That's about the simple way I can say it.
But aren't you talking about social discourse?
Yeah, yeah. It has to be some social discourse, but we're at a point now where uh, we're gonna have to shock some people to the room. We're gonna have to force some action. We can't just be, the traditional way. It's like, oh, I wish that I could just reach out to them and all that. No, no, no. You got to force them into that room. Martin Luther King, his biggest hustle was pool. Martin Luther King was a pool shark, and he would get in there and he'd show up at a bar, and he'd tell them folks, all right, if I can whoop your best pool player, y'all gonna show up at the meeting tomorrow. He said, come on, preacher, you can't play. What you know about pool? He'd get out there and run the table on them. He said, I'll see y'all at the meeting tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? And that's how people started showing up, because he was engaging with them. He was going to the taverns. He wasn't just preaching from the pulpit. He was going out in the streets and engaging with the people and getting them to show up. So that's the discourse we need. We need to have people to get the community engaged, and then we need to shock some folks. When those folks took to the street after George Floyd died, it got the attention of people. That's why all of a sudden they started talking about DEI. That's why all of a sudden they started talking about Black History Month. Oh yeah, we're good for Black folks. We love Black people. We want your money, right? That's when laws started getting passed. Heck, we got another holiday out of it. We got Juneteenth out of it. You know what I'm saying? So it was like, because people took to the streets and they said enough is enough is enough. And when people stopped protesting, then them folks went back to being who they were. And so it's a pressure campaign that until they say uncle, you're going to have to keep applying it to them.
Well, Mr. Fleming, it was a very good conversation, very enlightening. You've taught me a few things, and I would like to invite you back on the program, maybe after the first 120 days, and we can talk a little bit about what has happened, especially within our community, if that would be amenable to you.
Yeah, I'd be honored, brother. I enjoyed this. Um, I appreciate you letting me ramble.
No, no, it's not rambling, sir. When it provides the necessary information for our community, and that's some of the things that I think that we need to hear as a community. Uh, you know, uh, in some ways, it kind of goes back to me to that old battle between light skinned brothers and dark skinned brothers. We need to unite, present a united front. And, as you said, there has to be a level of social discourse without, and maybe some civil disobedience without violence. Uh, but we definitely need to help get our black communities on track, stop being so divisive, make sure we come together on the issues. And, I think these are the things that we're going to be confronted with in the next election. But once again, I commend you for all the things that you've done, the things that you are doing, and I look forward to having you back on the show. Any final thoughts for our audience tonight?
Well, brother King, I greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak on your platform. I encourage people to tune into a moment with Erik Fleming. We have a new episode every Monday, and uh, I'm part of a Black network, the MBG Podcast Network, run by a Black man named Leonard Young out of Delaware, and we're just trying to get the word out, man. That uh, you know we deserve to be here, and we contribute, and so we just want you to support, just like uh, I want you to support my show. I want you to support Brother King's show, and all the Black voices that are out there, because all of us have a role to play in turning this thing around and making our communities better. So, again, brother, I just thank you for opening up your space to allow me to come in.
I'd like to know more about the organization that you're talking about too. Maybe I can be a part of it. It sounds very helpful and very interesting, and I'm willing, most definitely, to contribute to anything that promotes uh, our community.
Yes,
So,
sir.
yeah, if you could send me the information, and I'd be glad to get in contact. But thank you so much for being a part of our show tonight. And as I said, we look forward to talking to you again after this first 120 days is up, and see what type of progress we're making. As you said, I'm all about looking for some young people, and mainly, it's all about coexisting. Uh, you know, uh, you don't we don't have to have dinner every Sunday. We don't have to go to the same church, but you know we all have to live on this planet called Earth.
That's
So
right.
appreciate you, brother. Looking
Yes, sir.
forward to
Thank
talking
you.
to you again. You have a
Yes,
great night.
you too, sir.
That was Mr. Erik Fleming, uh, former Democratic uh, representative in Mississippi, and we hope to hear from him again. I enjoyed the conversation, looking forward to having more people like Mr. Fleming back on the show. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time. Have a good weekend, everyone.